The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unforgiving glow across the sterile conference room. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I'll never forget the moment my world imploded in front of a room full of people who were supposed to be my colleagues. It wasn't just that I got fired, it was how it happened. The way they treated me like some disposable cog in their corporate machine, as if years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights meant nothing at all. I had walked into that meeting thinking it was going to be routine, a quarterly review, maybe a pat on the back for hitting yet another impossible target. Instead, I found myself seated at the far end of the mahogany table, flanked by two HR reps whose faces were masks of practiced indifference. Across from me sat Gregory Langston, our CEO, a man whose charm could sell ice to Eskimos but whose cruelty cut deeper than any blade. He didn't even look me in the eye when he spoke. "Evelyn," he began, his voice smooth as silk but laced with venom, "after careful consideration, we've decided that your role here is no longer necessary." My heart stopped. Or maybe it exploded, I couldn't tell. All I knew was that every pair of eyes in the room turned toward me, some curious, others pitying, and a few gleefully triumphant. Someone actually smirked. I felt my cheeks burn under the weight of their stares, humiliation crashing over me like a tidal wave. "We appreciate your contributions," Gregory continued, though his tone suggested otherwise, "but this decision is final. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties." Relieved of my duties. As if my work, the late nights poring over spreadsheets, the weekends sacrificed to meet deadlines, the sacrifices I made for this company, could be dismissed so casually. And then came the kicker: for transparency's sake, we thought it best to inform everyone simultaneously. Everyone. Simultaneously. Like I was being publicly executed for treason instead of simply losing my job. My hands trembled beneath the table, and I clenched them into fists to keep from shaking visibly. This wasn't just termination, it was humiliation, orchestrated for maximum impact. They wanted me gone, humiliated, erased. But what they didn't realize was that they had just lit a fire inside me, a fire fueled by rage, betrayal, and something darker, something primal. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment things started to unravel. It wasn't one big event, not really. It was a series of small indignities, each more grating than the last, until the cumulative weight crushed whatever goodwill I still harbored toward this place. When I first joined Sterling and Company, fresh out of business school with stars in my eyes, I believed in the mission. We weren't just selling products, we were solving problems, making lives better. At least, that's what they told us during orientation. But somewhere along the line, the ideals got buried under layers of bureaucracy and greed. The higher-ups cared less about innovation and more about padding their bonuses. Employees became statistics, numbers on a spreadsheet to be optimized or discarded as needed. Loyalty was a myth, a relic of a bygone era. Still, I tried to hold on to hope. I poured myself into my work, believing that if I proved myself indispensable, I'd earn their respect. How naive I was. It started with little things, my ideas being co-opted without credit, promotions passed over in favor of less qualified candidates with better connections. Then there were the meetings where my input was ignored, only to have someone else parrot it moments later and receive applause. Each slight chipped away at my confidence, but I swallowed my pride and kept pushing forward. After all, I reminded myself, success isn't given, it's earned. And succeed I did. Under my leadership, our department consistently outperformed expectations. Revenue soared, client satisfaction hit record highs, and morale improved despite the toxic environment festering above us. For a while, I let those wins sustain me, convincing myself that recognition would come eventually. But instead of gratitude, I faced resentment. Colleagues whispered behind my back, accusing me of being too ambitious, too driven. Even Gregory, who once praised my results, began treating me like a threat rather than an asset. That should have been my first warning sign. But I ignored it, choosing instead to double down, to prove that I belonged. What a fool I was. Now, sitting in my car outside the office building, I stared blankly at the steering wheel, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quite grasp. The engine idled quietly, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. How had it come to this? One minute, I was on top of the world, or so I thought, and the next, I was cast aside like yesterday's trash. The injustice of it burned hotter than anything I'd ever felt. As I drove home, the city blurred past my windows, its usual vibrancy dulled by the haze of anger clouding my vision. I replayed the scene in my head over and over again, dissecting every word, every glance, searching for answers. Why now? Why like this? Was it because I refused to play their games, to kowtow to their egos? Or was it simpler than that, just another casualty of corporate politics? When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house felt eerily silent. Normally, the quiet would have been comforting, a refuge from the chaos of the day. But tonight, it only amplified the emptiness gnawing at my chest. I dropped my bag by the door and sank onto the couch, staring at the blank TV screen without seeing it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I lost track. Time seemed irrelevant now. Somewhere between exhaustion and despair, a spark ignited within me. Maybe it was defiance, or maybe it was desperation, but whatever it was, it refused to be extinguished. They thought they could break me, humiliate me, erase me. But they underestimated one crucial thing, my determination. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. By morning, the fog had lifted, replaced by clarity sharper than any I'd experienced before. Revenge wasn't just an option, it was inevitable. Not petty retaliation, but something calculated, strategic. Something that would leave them questioning every move they'd ever made against me. They took everything from me, but they forgot one important detail: knowledge is power. And I knew Sterling and company better than anyone. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into planning with a ferocity that surprised even me. Every waking moment was devoted to dismantling the empire that had betrayed me. I started by reaching out to former colleagues, those who had also been chewed up and spit out by the same system. Together, we formed a network of allies, sharing information, resources, and grievances. Some were hesitant at first, wary of crossing such a powerful entity, but I convinced them that change was possible, if we worked together. Meanwhile, I delved deep into Sterling's operations, uncovering secrets they thought were buried forever. Financial discrepancies, unethical practices, confidential emails revealing corruption at the highest levels, it was all there, waiting to be exposed. With each discovery, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about settling scores anymore, it was about justice. Justice for everyone who had suffered under their tyranny. But revenge is a delicate dance, requiring patience and precision. I couldn't afford to act impulsively, not when so much was at stake. So I waited, biding my time, gathering evidence until the moment was right. In the meantime, I built a new life for myself, one free from the shackles of corporate servitude. Freelancing gave me flexibility, allowing me to focus on my true purpose without distraction. Gregory and his cronies likely assumed I'd slink away quietly, licking my wounds and fading into obscurity. How wrong they were. Little did they know, their downfall was already in motion, set into motion by the very woman they thought they'd destroyed. And when the time came, they would regret everything. Because Evelyn Carter doesn't forget. And she certainly doesn't forgive. The first step in my plan was subtle, almost imperceptible, a whisper of chaos that would ripple outward until it consumed them all. I knew better than to charge headfirst into battle. Instead, I planted seeds of doubt, sowing discord among the ranks of Sterling and company. It started with anonymous tips to key employees, carefully selected individuals who already harbored grievances against the company. A cryptic email here, a vague phone call there, nothing incriminating enough to trace back to me, but just enough to make them question what they thought they knew. One of those individuals was Marcus Hale, a mid-level manager whose career had been stunted by Gregory's favoritism toward less competent but more compliant subordinates. Marcus wasn't someone I'd worked closely with during my time at Sterling, but I'd observed him from afar. He was smart, ambitious, and deeply frustrated by the glass ceiling he couldn't seem to break through. More importantly, he had access to sensitive information about the company's internal operations, information that could prove invaluable if used correctly. I reached out to him under the guise of an old acquaintance, someone who happened to stumble across troubling details about Sterling's financial practices. At first, Marcus was skeptical, brushing off my warnings as paranoia or hearsay. But when I provided concrete evidence, carefully curated documents hinting at embezzlement and inflated expense reports, he began to take notice. The spark of curiosity turned into a flame of indignation, and soon, Marcus was digging deeper on his own, uncovering even more dirt buried beneath layers of corporate obfuscation. While Marcus worked within the system, I focused my efforts externally. Using the network of allies I'd cultivated, I leaked select pieces of information to journalists and industry watchdogs. Nothing too damning, at least not yet, but enough to raise eyebrows and plant questions in the minds of stakeholders. Rumors spread like wildfire, whispers of mismanagement, allegations of misconduct, hints of scandals waiting to explode. Each revelation chipped away at Sterling's pristine image, eroding trust and destabilizing their foundation. But perhaps the most satisfying part of my revenge thus far was watching Gregory squirm. For a man so accustomed to control, uncertainty was his Achilles heel. I saw it in the way he snapped at his assistants, the nervous twitch in his jaw during board meetings, the thinly veiled panic in his voice whenever he addressed the growing unrest within the company. He tried to brush off the leaks as baseless gossip, dismissing critics as jealous competitors seeking to undermine Sterling's success. But deep down, I knew he felt the walls closing in. Still, I refused to let up. Revenge isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, and I intended to wear them down piece by piece until nothing remained. My next move came in the form of a calculated strike against one of Sterling's most lucrative clients. This particular client, a multinational corporation with ties to several high-profile projects, had long been a cornerstone of Sterling's revenue stream. What they didn't know, and what I did, was that their partnership was built on shaky ground, riddled with contractual loopholes and questionable ethics. Through a combination of insider knowledge and strategic maneuvering, I orchestrated a scenario where this client found themselves questioning the value of their relationship with Sterling. Again, anonymity was key. I never directly implicated myself, instead guiding events from the shadows. Emails were forwarded, conversations overheard, documents accidentally left in plain sight. By the time the client pulled out of their deal, citing concerns over transparency and accountability, Gregory was apoplectic. His public attempts to salvage the partnership only made matters worse, further exposing the cracks in Sterling's facade. As the weeks turned into months, the pressure mounted. Employees grew restless, morale plummeted, and turnover rates skyrocketed. Investors began demanding answers, threatening lawsuits if their concerns weren't addressed. Even Gregory's inner circle started showing signs of dissent, their loyalty wavering as the ship sank beneath them. Yet despite the mounting chaos, I remained patient, biding my time until the moment was perfect. And then came the day when everything changed. It started innocuously enough, a routine audit requested by one of Sterling's largest shareholders. On paper, it seemed like a standard procedure, something the company had weathered countless times before. But this time was different. Thanks to Marcus's meticulous groundwork and my own behind-the-scenes manipulations, the auditors stumbled upon a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Financial irregularities, falsified reports, unethical business practices, it was all there, laid bare for the world to see. When the findings were made public, the fallout was immediate and devastating. Headlines screamed accusations of fraud and corruption, dragging Sterling's name through the mud. Share prices plummeted overnight, wiping out billions in market value. Board members scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal, pointing fingers and throwing each other under the bus in a desperate bid for self-preservation. And Gregory? He became a pariah, his once untouchable reputation reduced to ashes. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to revel in the destruction. All those sleepless nights, all those sacrifices I'd made for a company that repaid me with betrayal, it felt good to watch them crumble. But vengeance is a double-edged sword, and even as I savored their downfall, I couldn't shake the lingering sense of emptiness gnawing at my chest. Because no matter how much damage I inflicted, it wouldn't undo what had been done to me. The humiliation, the betrayal, the years wasted chasing approval from people who never deserved it, it was all still there, etched into my soul like scars that would never fully heal. Revenge might have given me power, but it hadn't brought me peace. Which left me with a choice, to walk away now, content with the wreckage I'd wrought, or to push further, to ensure that Sterling and company ceased to exist altogether. The latter option was tempting, almost intoxicating in its finality. But it also carried risks that could cost me everything I'd fought so hard to reclaim. So I hesitated, torn between closure and annihilation. And as I stood on the precipice of my decision, I realized something unsettling. The line between justice and vengeance had blurred beyond recognition. What started as a quest for accountability had morphed into something darker, more personal. I wasn't just fighting for redemption anymore, I was fighting for dominance. The question was, how far was I willing to go? In the days that followed, I immersed myself in preparation, refining my strategy and fortifying my defenses. If I was going to finish what I started, I needed to be ready for anything. Every contingency planned, every weakness exploited, every ally secured. There could be no room for error, no margin for failure. Sterling and company had underestimated me once. They wouldn't get the chance to do it again. Yet even as I plotted their ultimate demise, doubts crept in. Was this really what I wanted? To become the very thing I despised? Or was there another path, one that allowed me to reclaim my dignity without sacrificing my humanity? These questions haunted me, whispering in the quiet moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm my resolve. And then, unexpectedly, an opportunity presented itself, an offer I hadn't anticipated, from a source I didn't trust. Someone who claimed to share my vision, who promised to help bring Sterling to its knees. Someone whose motives were as murky as the waters I now navigated. Do I accept their assistance, knowing full well it could be a trap? Or do I forge ahead alone, risking everything on instincts honed by pain and betrayal? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain: the endgame was near. Whatever choice I made, it would define not just the fate of Sterling and Company, but the person I would become in the aftermath. The offer came from an unlikely source, Rachel Klein, a former executive at Sterling who had left the company years ago under mysterious circumstances. Back then, I'd only known her as a distant figure in the upper echelons of management, someone whose name was whispered with equal parts admiration and caution. But now, sitting across from her in a dimly lit cafe, I saw a woman burdened by regret and driven by a desire for redemption. Rachel didn't mince words. "I know what you're doing, Evelyn," she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "And I want to help." At first, I was skeptical. Why would someone like Rachel, a person who had once been part of the very system that crushed me, suddenly decide to join my crusade? Was this some ploy orchestrated by Gregory to trap me? But as she spoke, laying out details about Sterling's inner workings that only an insider could know, I began to see the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't offering her assistance out of altruism, she wanted justice too. Justice for herself, for the countless others who had been wronged, and perhaps even for the ideals Sterling and Company had long abandoned. Her proposal was simple yet audacious: instead of destroying Sterling outright, we would dismantle it from within and rebuild it into something better. A phoenix rising from the ashes, reborn not as a monument to greed but as a force for good. It was a risky proposition, one that required trust, compromise, and a willingness to let go of the anger that had fueled me for so long. But deep down, I knew it was the right path. Revenge might have given me power, but rebuilding offered something far more valuable: purpose. Together, Rachel and I devised a plan that combined my grassroots rebellion with her insider knowledge. We recruited key allies from both inside and outside the company, people who believed in the possibility of change. Marcus, emboldened by his discoveries, became one of our most trusted lieutenants, using his position to quietly rally support among disillusioned employees. Meanwhile, I leveraged my network of contacts to secure backing from influential investors and industry leaders who shared our vision of ethical business practices. The turning point came during a shareholder meeting called to address the ongoing crisis. By then, Sterling's reputation was in tatters, its future hanging precariously in the balance. Gregory, desperate to salvage what little control he still had, delivered a defensive speech riddled with half-truths and empty promises. But before he could finish, Rachel stood up, her presence commanding silence. "I've spent decades working for this company," she began, her voice ringing clear and unwavering. "And I've seen firsthand how far it strayed from the values it was founded upon. What we need isn't denial or deflection, it's transformation." She outlined our proposal: restructuring the company's leadership, implementing transparent governance policies, and redirecting resources toward initiatives that benefited employees and communities rather than lining executives' pockets. It was a bold vision, one that resonated deeply with shareholders tired of scandals and mismanagement. When the vote was cast, the decision was unanimous: Gregory and his cronies were ousted, and a new board was elected, with Rachel at its helm. In the months that followed, Sterling and Company underwent a metamorphosis. Under Rachel's guidance, the company shed its toxic culture and embraced a mission rooted in integrity and innovation. Employees who had once felt disposable were empowered to contribute meaningfully, their voices finally heard. Clients returned, reassured by the transparency and accountability that now defined every aspect of the business. And though the road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges, the progress was undeniable. As for me, I chose not to return to Sterling, not officially, anyway. Instead, I channeled my experience into helping other organizations navigate similar crises, guiding them toward sustainable growth without sacrificing ethics. My work gave me a sense of fulfillment I'd never found in corporate politics, a reminder that true success isn't measured by titles or paychecks but by the impact we leave on the world. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Rachel joined me. She brought 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me with a smile. "You did it," she said softly. "You changed everything." I shook my head, raising my glass in a silent toast. We did it, I corrected. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. The scars of betrayal still lingered, but they no longer defined me. I had taken back my power, not through destruction, but through creation. And as I looked ahead to the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, not as a victim, but as someone who had reclaimed her story and rewritten the ending. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy. But it was enough. More than enough.